Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another monthly reading wrap up. Thank you all for joining me. Before I start, my neighbors decided to listen to some very loud Manila music this morning, so hopefully you can't hear that. But if you do, just pretend you don't, okay? Because I can't do anything about it. Okay, so let's start with the September reading wrap up. The first thing that I read in September, these are always so heavy, and I'm always like holding them at the beginning of the video so that I can take a screen grab of that and just like use it as the thumbnail for the video. Okay, so the first book that I read in September is none other than Katabasis by R.F. Kuang. This is supposed to be like a dark academia book about a PhD student who has to go to hell to rescue her professor from there, to have him write for her a recommendation letter. And in theory, it sounds absolutely amazing. The problem with this book is that I didn't really like it, and I don't think it's necessarily for me, which is not like a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a bad book. It was just not really my cup of tea, and it is definitely my least favorite R.F. Kuang book. I read both Babel, which I absolutely adored, and Yellowface, which I liked very, very much. Unfortunately, this is not a favorite of mine from R.F. Kuang. First of all, the pacing of it. It is true that like after the halfway point, it starts to pick up the pace a bit more. The first half of it is painfully slow, I would say. Alice, our main character, while she kind of grew on me by the end of the book, she didn't really do that much. And Peter just felt like he was kind of there to help Alice, like when she can't deal with the situation or when she doesn't know how to do something. My favorite character from this book, whose name I already forgot, I think it's Elspeth or something like that. Weirdly enough, I opened the book to a page where her name is mentioned. Yes, Elspeth. Elspeth is this woman who we meet in hell, or rather Alice and Peter meet her in hell. And I like something about her. I just loved her character arc and her journey and everything like that. And I just wished we had more of her, because she does some pretty interesting things in hell, and she's helping our characters in some unique ways, I should say. We also have a cat who is pictured here on the cover of the book. Archimedes, the cat, I really liked him as a character. I think it's super fun to have like a pet sidekick in books. Weirdly enough, this book is marketed as kind of like a dark academia romance. Like even on the front cover here, we have the tagline "To Hell with Love." And to me, just didn't read this way. Alice and Peter, I just don't see them together. I just don't see how their love story, or what tried to be their love story, is relevant for the plot of this book. And yeah, it just didn't really work for me, let's say. But with that said, there is this discourse online about this book reading like it's a textbook, which in my opinion is not accurate at all. Yes, there are a lot of explanations needed for us as readers to understand how the things that are achieved in this book are possible, because it is based a lot on like theoretical concepts, a lot of maths and logic and philosophy and stuff like that. And you would have to have like an extensive background to understand those things without them being explained. But in my opinion, this does not read like a textbook at all. Like R.F. Kuang is very good at explaining those things in simple terms so that everyone who reads this book understands what it is about and how those things that they are doing are possible. I don't think I mentioned they're magicians and they work with like magic and stuff like that, so that's how they go to hell. So yeah, this is Katabasis by R.F. Kuang. I am heartbroken that I didn't like this, because first of all, the cover is gorgeous. Everyone was really excited about it, me included. And I just really like R.F. Kuang as an author. Like I love the way that she talks about her books and about the way that she's doing the research for her books. So I will continue reading R.F. Kuang's like upcoming books. I will continue reading her Poppy War trilogy that I really want to get into sometime. I don't think it's gonna happen like in the near future, but I do want to read that trilogy eventually. So I really like Arif Pong as an author. This book was just like not really my cup of tea. Moving on to the next book that I read in September, and this is also a newer release. It is from Michelle Wong, and this is House of the Beast. I really have to check on the title of this book because I think Sarah J. Maas kind of like turned my brain into mush when it comes to book titles like this, like House of Blank and Blank or A Blank of Blank and Blank. And I'm not entirely sure if I remember the correct title all the time. So, House of the Beast by Michelle Wong. If you don't know the author of this book, this is a debut novel, and Michelle Wong is the illustrator that illustrated the Legend of Korra graphic novels. And this book is full of absolutely stunning illustrations. First of all, the chapter headings look like this. And there are also illustrations with like the characters and how they look. We have illustrations like these, which are really, really pretty. And this one. I really like that touch in the book. I think it adds a lot to the story itself. So, House of the Beast. This is about our main character, Alma. Alma, at the beginning of the story, is a young girl. She comes from like a very poor family. She only has her mother. She doesn't really know who her father is. Alma one day discovers that her mother is very ill, and because they're poor, they can't really afford the correct treatment for her mom. So Alma really tries to do something about that, and she discovers how to contact her dad. She writes to him. She tells him that, her mom is really sick and they really need help. And her father decides to show up. What Alma didn't really know is that her father is like a really despicable human being, and he agrees to help Alma's mom on one condition. Alma has to go live with him. Alma's father, whose name obviously I forgot. Alma's father is the second in command of the House of the Beast, and House of the Beast is this kind of like religious faction that believe in the god of death, which is the dread beast mentioned here in the title of the book. Alma's uncle, so her father's brother, is the first in command, in charge of the House of the Beast, and his brother kind of has like the majority of the power of the dread beast. Alma's father is basically trying to upstage his brother, and he's trying to take all of the power for himself. So he's planning to use Alma to do that. Alma, once she arrives at her father's estate, she is very badly treated, as you might imagine. Her mother is still very ill. Her father doesn't really seem to do anything about that, even though he promised that he would. And one day, Alma's mom just dies. Alma's not there to see her mom as she passes away. She's obviously like heartbroken and very sad about that. And in that moment, she kind of swears that she will do everything in her power to assure her revenge, basically, and her vengeance on her father for letting her mom die, and also for taking Alma away from her mother. Also, Alma discovers that what she believed being her imaginary friend from her childhood, who helped her get through some really like dark times in her childhood, is actually the Dread Beast, and Alma is his favorite, it turns out. With that information, Alma is coming up with a plan to basically destroy her father. But in doing that, they might also destroy the world as they know it. I really liked this book. I think it's a really good debut novel, and even though it is quite YA in some aspects, the beast didn't really feel like this menacing like god of death. It just felt kind of like flat at times. I really did like the story overall. I liked the ending and how we got there, and the plot twists towards the end, even though they were quite predictable in some aspect. So this is House of the beast. Next up, I read Rebecca Ross's newest release, Wild Reverence. I was so excited for this book, and Miss Rebecca Ross didn't disappoint. So, if you are not aware of who this author is and what she wrote in the past, she has two kind of like duologies. River Enchanted is the first one, or at least that's the first book in her first duology. I have not read that one. What I did read though, and probably like thousands, billions other people, is Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows, which is the Letters of Enchantment duology that was really popular like a couple of years ago. And this book serves as a prequel for the Letters of Enchantment duology. I have it in this stunningly gorgeous UK edition with sprayed edges, and also really cool artwork for the end papers. Let me just quickly take off the dust jacket, but I shouldn't be I shouldn't be destroying it. So this is the artwork for the end papers. Absolutely stunning. And even though this is not quite how I pictured our characters when I read the book, because I read it first on my Kindle and then the physical copy arrived. So even though this is not quite how I pictured the characters, I really do like this artwork. This is what is underneath the dust jacket. It says, "We were doomed, she and I. One day I would perish and she would live on, endless as the stars." Love it. Absolutely love that. This book truly reads like a Greek mythology retelling, but obviously not with our like real gods, but with the gods from the Letters of Enchantment duology. So in Wild Reverence, we are following Matilda, who is some sort of messenger for the gods. She is the offspring of an underling and a skyling. Her mom is an underling. The underlings are the gods that are living beneath the earth. And then her father is a skyling, and the skylings are, as you would assume, the gods that live in the sky. And because she is part of both of the worlds, she's able to travel between them. She's kind of like the only one that can travel between the worlds. When she is a kid, Matilda has these dreams of a mortal boy, and they kind of become friends in those dreams, even though he doesn't really know who she is until later on. 10 years later, when both of them are kind of like adults, this boy, this guy really, Vincent, he writes a letter to Matilda to ask for her help. They fall in love, they have to go to war, they have to tackle the whole like mortal immortal pairing kind of a thing. And there are like a lot of things that are happening outside of their relationship. Like we also meet the two gods that started the war in the Letters of Enchantment duology. In this book, we also learn the history and how certain magical objects, certain typewriters, let's say, were crafted and how their whole magic kind of works, which was really cool to see. I think you can read this book even though you don't have the context of the Letters of Enchantment duology. Like you can read this one first and then read the duology, or just not read the duology and read this book. Even though I do believe that you should read the three books, because Rebecca Ross just has like a way of writing that feels lyrical and flowery and whimsical, but in the same time it's not very wordy. Like she's not adding things just for the sake of like adding things. All of them make sense and are relevant to the world that she's been crafting in this book. So yeah, I really liked Wild Reverence. The pacing of it, again, in the beginning it took me like a bit of time to understand kind of like where we are and what's happening, just because in the beginning of the story you don't really see the tie-in with the Letters of Enchantment duology, but after a while you start to pick up on certain things. So yeah, absolutely love this one. Wild Reverence, absolutely amazing. Would highly recommend if you have already read the Letters of Enchantment, or if you didn't and you want to experience a Rebecca Ross book for the first time. I think this was marvelous. It's gonna hurt, but it's marvelous. This is Wild Reverence. Next up, I read a duology. I've been seeing the first book, which is this one, The Night Ends with Fire, in the bookstores for the past year or so, ever since it was published. And when I looked it up on Goodreads, I saw that it's part of like a series or a duology. I didn't quite know what it was at that time. And I decided to just wait for the other books to be released until I get into it. And this year, the second book was released, The Dragon Wakes with Thunder. And because this is a duology and it's completed, I decided to finally pick these books up, and I read them in the month of September. So, in the first book, we are following our protagonist, Jaime Lin, as she has to be married off to this like awful guy. She doesn't really want to be married. Her father is an addict of opium and he's just like a despicable human being. He's treating Maylin and her siblings and also her adoptive mother very, very poorly. They talk a lot about Maylin's father and what he's going through, but at the end of the day, she's just not really keen on helping her father anymore because he's not a good human being. So she doesn't feel the need to go to war because of her filial duty towards her father, as it is the case in the Legend of Mulan. But she wants to go to war because of her own greed and wish to be free. She doesn't want to be married off. She doesn't want to depend on men to travel, to experience her life at its fullest potential. So she decides to go to war in order to experience all of those things. So she goes to war. She gets entangled in this political conflict in her world, like in the real world, but also something that happens in the spirit realm with the dragon. By the end of this first book, Maylin is in deep trouble with one of the royal courts, and she has to really calculate her moves and what she wants to do next if she wants to be free, let's say. And then in the second book, The Dragon Wakes with Thunder, pretty much the first half of this book is just like court politics and court machinations and stuff like that, and I just love those elements so much that I was obsessed with the second book. Sure, the pacing could have been like a bit better, but it's just how things are, and I still like very much enjoyed the second book. I think this is a great duology overall and kind of underrated. I didn't hear like a lot of people talking about this. It is YA, so don't expect like major fantasy elements in it, but I think what the author managed to do with this duology is done well. So yeah, this is The Night Ends with Fire and The Dragon Wakes with Thunder by KX Sung. I think this is the Dragon Spirit duology, if I'm not mistaken. Next up, I read Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. Yes, I know, yet another T. Kingfisher book, but I can't help it. Like, I just love the way that T. Kingfisher writes. I think she's definitely like my favorite author that I read the most from this year and discovered kind of this year. And well, not discovered because I read some of her books last year as well. But this year, I feel like I really read a lot of T. Kingfisher books. And I'm honestly so grateful and excited to live in a world where we have books like this. If you don't know, T. Kingfisher is really big on fairy tale retellings, but not the kind that you would imagine. Like, all of her books are original in their plot, but they're just based on this idea of fairy tales and fairy tale tropes, but she just does them really well. None of them are predictable. They are always turned on their head and then yet again and then yet again, and then you end up with a book like this. I just love Nettle and Bone. It was so much fun. It is in the realm of like cozy fantasy, but it's not boring, it's not predictable. The characters are really well done, and the plot I thought was amazing for a book like this. In Nettle and Bone, we are following our main character Mara, and Mara is the daughter of a queen, but their land is very small and they live in between these two like huge kingdoms. So they always feel like they're threatened by one kingdom or the other, and they are trying to kind of like solve things out. Their kingdom is not rich. They really have to be very careful about all of the political things that are happening around them so that they don't end up in war, because they can be very easily conquered by the other two neighboring kingdoms. And her mom, because she's very calculated, obviously she's the queen, right? She comes up with this alliance between the prince of one of the other kingdoms and her daughter. I think it's her eldest daughter or something like that. And her eldest daughter goes to marry this prince in this neighboring kingdom. Long story short, one day she turns up being dead. Mara is very concerned about this. Like, her sister was so lively and full of energy and just like a ball of joy, and all of a sudden when she married and she moved to this other kingdom, she turned up dead. Like, what's happening with that? And because her mom really wants to keep the peace between the kingdoms, she chooses to marry her other daughter with this prince. Mara is obviously terrified because she's the next one, right? Like, she's the only one left of these three sisters. And if the sister that is currently married with the prince will die, she will be the next in line to basically marry. Her mom sends her to this convent of nuns in order to protect her. One day, Mara receives news that her sister is pregnant, and she goes there with her mom. She almost didn't recognize her sister because she doesn't look like herself. She seems like she's miserable, and she had all of these like complications with her pregnancy, but finally she is able to give birth. Mara is very concerned about her sister because she sees that she's not in a very good shape, and she also sees these major like bruises on her sister. So she doesn't really know what's up with that until she discovers that the prince is quite literally abusing her. So Mara, feeling very enraged on her sister's behalf, obviously, she wants to do something about that. She goes to a grave witch who comes up with this plan on how to basically kill the prince. On their journey, Mara and the grave witch are joined by the skeleton of a dog that was brought back to life, a chicken that's somehow possessed by a demon. Don't ask any questions, just like go with it. A former knight and a godmother who's not really blessing the kids, but she's kind of sort of cursing them. This was so much fun. I had a great time reading this book, and I can't wait to read my next Digging Fisher book. So this is Nettle and Bone. Next up, I read a nonfiction book, and weirdly enough, this book was like my favorite out of everything that I read in September. This is Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green, and I've been wanting, like, I've been aware of this book ever since it was published in March of this year. But recently, I read three novels by the Bronte sisters, and in one of the introductions of these books, I learned that all three Bronte sisters died of consumption, or as it is now known, tuberculosis. And immediately when I read that, I just knew that, oh my God, like John Green has a book on tuberculosis. I should read that one. I, for some reason, couldn't quite picture how John Green is going to write a nonfiction book because obviously I am quite familiar with his other works like The Fault in Our Stars, Looking for Alaska, An Abundance of Catherines, Turtles All the Way Down, and stuff like that. And for some reason, I just didn't envision how he would write a nonfiction book. This was so heartbreaking, but also so full of hope for the future. I think I read just like crying every chapter, like there were no exceptions. Not that it's like intrinsically sad, but it just gives you all of these gut-wrenching facts about our world, the healthcare system, and about all of these people that live in countries that are considered being poor, that can't afford basic healthcare and basic treatment for their illnesses, for their diseases. And obviously, because the main theme of this book is tuberculosis, it centers on that, but it talks about so much more than tuberculosis. On one side, we have the story of Henry, who John Green and his wife met while they were visiting this hospital that was treating tuberculosis in Sierra Leone. And because one of John Green's kids is called Henry, obviously he got very invested in Henry's story, the boy that he met at this hospital. So on one side, we have Henry's story and how he developed this drug-resistant form of tuberculosis that now the doctors are trying to treat. but it is also talking about the story of Henry's mom and how she basically what was the state of Sierra Leone when Henry was born and how she had to go through all of these heartbreaking and just like terrifying things with war emerging in Sierra Leone when Henry was born. But also on the other side, John Green is presenting us with all of these facts of tuberculosis, all of these very well-known figures from our history that died of tuberculosis, how the test for tuberculosis was like invented or discovered, and what exactly is it about tuberculosis that makes it so curable in certain parts of the world in our day and age right now in 2025, and also what are the facts that are making tuberculosis so untreatable in other parts of the world. Obviously talking about the healthcare system and how certain pharmaceutical companies are profiting off of people's illnesses, people's health, basically. I just underlined so many things in this book. Like at some point I have to get like a physical version of this book and just like to reread it and re-experience this book all over again because it's just I get teary-eyed just like thinking about this book and what it talks about. The last line in the book is ultimately we are the cause, we must also be the cure. So as I was saying, the book is not intrinsically sad or hopeless, but it just makes you think of the state of the world and of, you know, certain things that are happening that we might not necessarily think about in the grand scheme of things. Also, another thing that I wanted to mention is I appreciate so much how John Green tied all of the things that he talked about in this book to his own life, because that's what I was thinking about prior to actually reading this book is how, like, why is he writing a book about tuberculosis? And he goes in depth about that in the book, but also in the afterword at the end of the book. So I I just love it. I just love it. Like, if you take anything from this video, please go and read this book because I guarantee you will not regret it. So this is Everything is Tuberculosis, the History and Persistence of Our Deadliest Infection by John Green. Now, moving from tuberculosis to Fairy Dick, I read A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, and I do have the reading vlog for this book already up on the channel if you want to watch that. I'm doing like a full recap summary-ish of this book in that vlog, and I will have upcoming vlogs for the next books in the series. But why I wanted to read this series now, so I read Crescent City and Throne of Glass, and even though Throne of Glass is not necessarily like my favorite series, I did really like Crescent City for all the wrong reasons. Crescent City is one of those like guilty pleasures that like, you know, it's bad but you kind of can't stop loving it. So because I want to do a Crescent City reread soon-ish, I wanted to read ACOTAR first because there are some things that are connecting between ACOTAR and Crescent City, and I really wanted to have the context from ACOTAR. So I obviously started with the first book, and it was not great. The pacing was weird, first of all. Like, this just seems to be my main issue with the books that I read. Well, the majority of the books that I read in September is the pacing. This book was very questionable in terms of kind of everything that happened in it. If you don't know what The Court of Thorns and Roses is about, or at least the first book is about, we are following Feyre, who is a mortal girl who one day kills a wolf, and then she discovers that that wolf was actually a fairy, and she has to go to the fairy realm as retribution for killing one of their own. And a lot of just like nonsensical stupid things happen from there. The ending of this book obviously made me like excited to read the next books, which, spoiler alert, are so much better than this one. Like, I'm currently at the third one right now when I'm filming this video, Court of Wings and Ruin, and it just gets like miles better than this book. So yeah, this was A Court of Thorns and Roses. Kind of a rocky start for this series. Not as bad as Throne of Glass though, but it was just fine. And with that, these are all of the books that I read in September. Thank you all so much for watching. Do let me know in the comments down below what was your favorite book that you read in September. What are you excited to read in October? And yeah, I will see you probably with a new video. Well, not probably, because I already have like pre-filmed a lot of things, but I will see you soon with a new video here on the channel. Bye everyone.